I've built sales teams that has generated 8 figures in high-ticket B2B sales without paid ads, without fancy funnels, and without relying on unicorn closers. Most founders are trying to scale revenue when they haven't even built a real pipeline yet. In this episode, I'm going to show you how to build a B2B sales pipeline that multiplies your deal flow, attracts real buyers, and gives your sales rep or profit partner what they actually need to close at scale. I'll also show you the exact cold outreach model we've used to replace ad spend and how we validate offers without ever having to run a funnel. All right, we're going to build your B2B sales pipeline using 3 leverage points. Point number 1 is precision targeting. This is so you don't have to guess who it is that you need to reach. Leverage point number 2 is outbound infrastructure. This is so leads can come in consistently to you without having to leverage any type of ad spend. And finally, leverage point number 3 is going to be your offer framing and filtering. This is so only real qualified buyers actually get to the point of closing. So let's break them all down deeper, point by point. Point number 1, precision targeting. Most B2B sales pipelines fail before they even get started. This is because most people are targeting too wide, too vague, and way too cold. A great pipeline doesn't start with leads. It starts with what I like to call a source map. And all a source map is simply knowing where your ideal buyers are already hanging out, what kind of services are they already hiring for, and of course, what kind of pain are they already voicing out to the public. So here's how you actually do it. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to want to actually audit 5 to 10 accounts that you would absolutely kill to work for or to have as a client or to partner with, whatever it is that you want to do for your service. Once you know those accounts, you want to identify the roles, not the titles, the actual roles within that organization that you know are going to be your best fit buyers, right? These are the actual decision makers. Now, here's the most important part. This is where everybody screws up. You want to start there. One niche, AKA one buyer, only one, focusing on one pain point, only one. And what this does is most people hear that and they freak out and they're like, oh gosh, but I'm limiting myself. Well, no, you're actually freeing yourself up because once you know the one buyer and you know the one pain point, guess what you have as an advantage? Your advantage is you now only have to focus on one message, one source of messaging that's ideal to that buyer with that pain point, not anything else. Instead of looking as a bad thing, look at it like a good thing. Imagine being in the position where you know your pain point and the messaging so well that is literally all you have to talk about over and over and over again for the next 12 months. Let me ask you a question. Do you feel that if you had just one messaging and that's all you talked about, a very specific message, do you think that you would eventually be able to attract a person coming to you that actually has that problem and that pain point? Hopefully the answer is yes. But imagine the opposite. You're so stressed out and you're focusing on all these different pain points, all these different buyer types. And you're like, well, I help with this one macro problem. And I know that if I do this one macro problem, then all these other people, well, I know they have that problem. So hopefully they'll be attracted. And then you wonder why it's just crickets and no one's reaching out to you and no one's resonating and why it is hard to actually stack up your pipeline. Being specific is not a bad thing. It is actually a very good thing, especially in the beginning stages. But there's a problem. It doesn't matter who you're targeting if you don't even have a system to reach those people at scale. Which brings us to point number 2, the outbound infrastructure. If you're watching this right now and you are completely dependent on referrals, I want to be very clear. You do not have a pipeline. You only have a system that is completely based on luck. And luck does not scale. And here's the thing when it comes to outbound. Outbound actually gives you control, but it only gives you control when you actually systematize it as a process, a simple process that anyone can follow. So here's what real outbound looks like at scale. The first component is having an actual lead gen machine. It can be LinkedIn, cold email, even DM scraping, and of course, Sales Navigator. And eventually you can obviously have a combination of all of these. In fact, I just had a conversation with one of my clients the other day, and we looked over her numbers for the past 5 deals that just closed in this month. And I asked her, I said, hey, like, let's look at the sources and see where a lot of these deals are coming from. And what's fascinating is two of them came from cold email, one came from cold call, and then the other two deals actually came from LinkedIn, right? We're just starting to really obsess over that data so we know what to double down on over time. And it's not a bad thing having multiple sources, even in the beginning stages, because sometimes stuff can shift. For example, with cold email, we noticed a huge shift of decline because on the back end, Google did some kind of change. And of course, they're not going to notify you on this, but they did a change that hurt deliverability. So, whatever that change is, the frustrating part with cold email is if you don't know what the words are and you're saying those words in an email, then it's going to hurt your deliverability. And of course, Google's not going to tell you. But imagine having an entire ecosystem of just that one messaging and cold email driving your entire business. And then boom, Google does a change and sales could literally drop. So you definitely want to have an ecosystem where you're leveraging different methods of reaching out instead of just one. So it doesn't put the entire business at risk overall. All right. Once you know what your lead gen machine is going to be, the next thing you need is one sales rep, or my personal preference, actually getting yourself a profit partner, someone you can partner with who will just take over all the sales for you and do the direct outreach for you, right? That is their role and responsibility as a partner to take those tasks off of your plate and bring revenue into the business. Once you have a profit partner, you now want to focus on your messaging framework. This is simply all the messaging you're going to use for outreach. And a huge mistake that a lot of people make is not focusing on pain first in their messaging. In fact, they do the opposite. They focus on pitching first. You do not want to do outbound and do outreach and pitch every single person. You want to have a conversation, really understand their needs, understand where they're at in the intent stage, and focus on pain, not pitching. And finally, you're going to want to have a weekly KPI review. This is where you can just simply go and review the numbers. How many people and contacts did you reach out to? Were these segmented and from different sources? Were they segmented from different lists? Out of these lists, how many people actually replied to us? Out of the people who replied, how many of those turned into an actual phone conversation? And out of everyone that turned into a phone conversation, how many of those deals are actually pending close? Or how many of those deals actually closed, right? Reviewing the numbers and reviewing the KPI gives you a health check on the process and the business and lets you know what improvements have to be made so that you can start systematizing it and making it better and better over time. And as a bonus, I actually recommend that you test 10 different variations of your offer in 10 days. This gives you the benefit of speed without ever having to touch things like paid ads. And of course, remember, volume negates luck. So if you're not doing enough volume, you're never going to get to the point where you're going to have replies anyways. So don't be lazy, put in work, put in the volume, and then the data will come. And once you have data, you're already on the path towards success. Okay, but if you do volume and now you have leads, what happens if those leads book a call, but they're not actually ready to buy? Or even worse, what happens if they do buy, but they're not a good fit? Not a good fit, people, leads to what? Refunds, churn, or being a headache client over time. Of course, you want to avoid that at all costs, right? I would hope so. Which leads me to point number 3. This is the offer framing and the filtering process. The best pipelines don't just drive volume, but they filter out volume with intent. You see, most founders think that more calls actually equals more closes. And in fact, it's the complete opposite. More qualified calls equals more closes. Let me say that again. More qualified calls will equal more closes. If you just focus on volume and you have no filtering, then you're just going to be wasting your time with leads and prospects who are never going to buy or be a good fit in the first place. Now you're just wasting time, energy, and effort. And even worse, you're missing out on opportunity cost because that time could have been spent with a really, really qualified individual. So what do? Well, the first thing you want to do is you want to use the qualify frame. Make your entire sales process around having the prospect sell themselves to you and your profit partner by qualifying themselves. This is done by pushing leads to a short video that they watch before they ever hop on a call with you. Okay. And this video is just simply designed to start planting the seed for the beliefs you want your prospects to have on your methodology or to pre-frame certain objections, whatever it is. You craft that and you put it together. And now by the time the prospect is on the call with you or your profit partner, they're already ready to sell themselves on why they believe your methodology is going to be a good fit for them instead of you hopping on a call and having to sell them on your methodology. That is not a good way to set yourself up for success. And if you actually hired a really, really good profit partner, then they will be trained to know how to use this process, use this system, and what questions to ask the prospect to actually make themselves sell themselves to them, compared to like a traditional closer. If you just get a closer to go and do this, they don't know how to think long-term like a profit partner, right? Most closers are trained to expect a qualified inbound lead just hitting their calendar without doing any work and already convinced to buy, right? Most closers think like order takers, right? But if you get yourself a really good profit partner, you won't have to run the risk of somebody without the skill set. Very, very important. And remember, by having the qualify frame, this is going to remove 70% of the friction for you, right? Imagine 70% of the friction already being alleviated and giving you the highest chance to turn that prospect into an actual qualified close. Now, you don't 10x your sales pipeline with things like tactics. You do it by installing a system that turns cold names into qualified buyers and doing it at scale without you. And when you stop chasing more leads and start building replicable demand engines within your organization, that's when your pipeline finally becomes predictable. And predictability is what is going to help you scale. My name is Dylan Starr, and this is the Sell for Scale show. So if you're watching this and you want to build a B2B sales engine and machine that you don't have to babysit, then please make sure you subscribe to the show. Subscribe here if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe if you're listening to the podcast on audio. Now, on today's episode, I mentioned a lot talking about a sales leader who can actually partner with you and run the outbound machine for you. If you don't know what I'm referring to, then make sure you go back and listen to episode 8 of the show. This is where I cover how to find and recruit the perfect profit partner for your business. And as always, keep crushing it, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.